It got me to a point of just really asking myself, man, what is wrong with me? Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. I dove head and heart onto the deep end, doing all that I can. I never thought I was going to share this. Well, welcome to the One Step Podcast. It's been quite a long time, and a lot has happened since I've published my last episode. For one, I've moved into a new space, and for those of you watching, you probably noticed a new setup. I have to give a shout out to my friends Rob and Gabriella for helping me set up this new background. And man, I just have to say, I'm really grateful to be back. I've realized how much I really do enjoy having this podcast, being able to share what I'm learning and have conversations with others, learning from their stories on creating a change in your life and in your world. And I've also recognized how much bandwidth I actually have. And so I can tell you now that my commitment for this podcast is really just going to be aiming to publish one episode a month, which is the same cadence I started out with, but this time around, specifically the first Monday of every month. And there might be a bonus episode here and there, but that's the schedule that I'm currently committing to. And I'm just looking forward to getting back into it. Well, I mean, man, as far as this past year, especially the past few months, navigating different highs and lows, it's led me to learn a lot more about myself. And man, it's been absolutely transformative. I recently heard of the quote from the Greek philosopher Socrates, who famously said, "Know thyself," which in today's understanding would be to know yourself. You know, this actually reminds me of something I used to say a lot, in how I would say, like, oh yeah, singleness is the best time to learn more about yourself, your values, what you enjoy, what takes you off, what's the current direction of your life. You know, best time to discover that before dating and so forth. And what I come to realize is that, man, actually the learning never stops. In whichever relationship status or season of life you may find yourself, whether in singleness, in dating, and even marriage. From what I hear, even after many years of marriage, you're constantly learning more about yourself and your spouse, especially as we're ever evolving. In this past year, my eyes were really open to see how different patterns and behaviors and mindsets I carried were negatively affecting both myself and also how I related with others. And it got me to a point of just really asking myself, man, what is wrong with me? And it became very apparent that deeper things needed to be addressed. The psychiatrist Carl Jung, he once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so I dove head and heart onto the deep end. Man, doing all that I can. One component in this journey is just reading plenty of books and just diving deeper into all this. And one of the books that I read was Understanding Your Attachment Style by Mark Cameron. Now, if you're thinking, Jonathan, what in the world is an attachment style? I'm glad you asked. It's actually based off the subject in psychology called attachment theory, which essentially talks about how the way we were cared for as children and the different life experiences that we've encountered create an internal pattern for how we relate with others. And that pattern, or style, as the book describes it, shapes how secure or insecure we feel when it comes to closeness, how we handle conflict, and how we give and receive love as adults. Another book that's actually related to this is the book called How We Love by Milan and Kay Yurkovich. It's another great read. With that book, its focus as far as the solution, though, is mainly geared towards couples. Whereas this book, Understanding Your Attachment Style, it does a really great job in explaining the subject and the dilemma that we face by not having an understanding for self-awareness and for our attachment style. It really helps you identify what your attachment style is and the likely causes for that. And it helps equip you with very practical steps in how to move toward a secure attachment style. And what is especially helpful for this book is that it's written for anybody, regardless of your relationship status. And man, I don't say this lightly, but outside of the Bible, this has been the most impactful book that I've read. not only because it taught me different things like how to actually attune to others or explain what the difference is between what being responsible for myself versus responsible to other actually means, but it was a catalyst used to connect the dots to finally make sense of different experiences throughout my whole life, especially my upbringing and how they've affected me and why I react to others the way that I do. To finally make sense of different behaviors, emotions, and beliefs that I've wrestled with since being young. And with that awareness, gaining the insight to practice in overcoming them, growing into a better version of myself, relating with others. And man, while therapy has been helpful in other areas of my life, I can see now how previous attempts in me growing in this particular area of my life, tools were being given to address the behaviors rather than the actual root causes of those behaviors. But until the heart and mind are addressed, until the effects of our past are acknowledged, those tools won't be as effective as they're intended to be. You know, there's a popular saying that says, time heals all wounds. And that's the biggest baloney I've heard. You know, I actually appreciate how my friend Pablo puts it, where he says, time doesn't heal all wounds. Intentionality does. Time is just a component. It's kind of like having a torn ACL and someone deciding, oh, I'm just going to wait this out. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but time alone isn't going to fix that. You can give it time and learn to even to live with it, but that'll likely lead you to being limited in your range of motion, experiencing pain on certain movements, and being limited from certain activities. But if you wanted to live a full life, if you wanted to live with a full range of motion, it'll require you to be intentional in treating it. And that treatment will depend on the damage. And as you do so, then time becomes your friend in helping your body recover. Well, in the same way, our emotional wounds don't heal just because months or years go by or by brushing them off as if they don't have an effect or simply just trying to have a positive perspective. They heal when we intentionally face them, having honest self-reflection and hard conversations, inviting God and safe people into that space, and seeking knowledge by using the resources available, whether books, and yes, it may take some effort to find the right one, but at times therapy can be helpful and temporarily necessary. Time simply supports when intentionality started. So here is a very small part of all that I learned about myself. You may resonate with some of it. And just a quick disclaimer, as far as the different attachment styles, the book lists 5, but I'll briefly talk through 2 today. And the different labels are simply language to describe the pattern, but by no means are some personality identity that defines you. And man, so much of what I learned wasn't necessarily like suggested to me or told to me, but it simply just gave language that described what I was already experiencing. That being said, I learned how I can be a pleaser and that I often go above and beyond to try and appease others because I want to avoid rejection and intense conflict, especially the feeling of disappointing and displeasing others. Ironically enough, those were 2 things that were directly tied to my upbringing: rejection and abandonment from my father, which I spoke publicly about in a previous episode, and conflict navigating other family dynamics. More specifically, and I never thought I was going to share this, but trying to resolve the anxiousness that I would deal within my own heart. See, in my mind, I had thought anxiety looked like a more heightened emotion that was experienced more frequently. And so I would tell others that I usually would never deal with anxiety. But whenever someone is upset at me, especially those closest to me, that's when fear and anxiety would kick in and I wouldn't even recognize it. I would go into fix-it mode to try to close the gap and to avoid separation. And not necessarily physical separation, but relational separation. And that kind of separation feeling, oh man, I hate it. Since then, I've had to learn the importance of me being able to tolerate displeasure from others and me being able to assert myself, to be able to face my fears and tolerating my negative feelings rather than trying to quench them. I've also had to realize how I have some tendencies or a blend of being an avoider. See, avoiders in general tend to dismiss their emotions or restrict their needs, especially as a way to not deal with negative emotions. And while that can be true for me at times, what is especially true is how I became very self-reliant at a young age. Growing up in a single parent home where my mom simply did the best she could with what she knew to provide for our physical needs and be there for us to the extent that she could be, the reality of what we lived in forced me to grow up really fast and to take on a lot of responsibility early on. It began a belief in me that I had to do everything myself. And even though I was okay with others depending on me, I was very slow on depending on others. I didn't express my emotions, and I don't really recall being asked much. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there were times growing up that my mom would ask me, "Hey, what's wrong?" whenever she saw me frustrated. But I just didn't allow myself to express myself, and I was more concerned about the response I might get, or simply just didn't know how to depend on her and be vulnerable. And so I would either dismiss the opportunity and say nothing's wrong, even though something clearly was wrong, or I would say I was just frustrated and just leave it at that. But since then, I've learned that anger and frustration is a secondary emotion. And often there's another emotion lying within that. In recent years, I began to learn how to open up my heart and become more dependent, internalizing that it's okay. And it's not only until very recently where I have this understanding about me and practice recognizing those emotions and articulating them. It definitely has been a continual exercise. And the final thing I learned is that what shame actually is, and discovered how much I've allowed it to be present in my life. The author, Mark Cameron, he does a great job in distinguishing the difference between shame and guilt, where he says this: with guilt, our focus is on our action, regarding that as the mistake or the thing that was wrong or bad. But with shame, our focus is on our sense of self, where we believe we are the mistake or defective. To put in other words, the message we tell ourselves with guilt is, I did something wrong. Whereas the message we tell ourselves with shame is, there's something wrong with me. He goes on to say that it's harder to change our personhood than it is in action. Shame makes us feel unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. And it manifests in negative labels we assign to ourselves: bad, worthless, unlovable, or stupid. Shame is often accompanied by feeling powerless and disconnected, causing us to dwell on mistakes and making us want to hide. And after I first read that, I literally had to pause and I just began to weep. Not out of sorrow, but out of compassion for my younger self, because I was so hard on myself. And it finally clicked in making sense of my whole experience. That there were different voices in my upbringing that just simply lacked accountability, and I took on the blame a lot. And in the circumstances where I was just giving my best effort, yet the situation was not changing, the narrative I would just tell myself is, what am I missing? What's wrong with me? And how come I didn't come with batteries included? And just feeling the helplessness. And I definitely carried that shame and that narrative into adulthood. And this is just a sliver of all that I've been learning and experiencing healing in. I don't share any of this to gain sympathy or to justify my reactions that I developed. This is simply just to demonstrate how worthwhile it's been in me just gaining awareness and insight that I could practice in establishing a new pattern. Like I mentioned, the book does a really great job in providing growth goals for each attachment style. and very practical steps in how to grow toward a secure attachment style. One of those practical steps is actually reframing the insecure beliefs that we carry. Now, why is this important? I appreciate how Mark Cameron describes our beliefs as similar to anchors and how they tie our emotions and our needs, which then leads to the behaviors that we demonstrate. That our beliefs can either sink us or save us. Here are two examples from the book about reframing insecure beliefs into secure ones that I found applicable for me. The first insecure belief is that conflict is upsetting and bad, so we should always avoid it. But the secure belief, in contrast to that, is that conflict is normal, and it could be an opportunity to grow closer through repair and understanding each other's views. The second insecure belief is that negative emotions are bad since they make people irrational, and this means that you're weak. But the secure belief, in contrast to that, is that emotions indicate needs that can be met and comforted. That it's healthy to be balanced with both logic and emotions. And there are many more examples that the book walks through that I think everyone can find applicable for them. This is how we create new neural pathways in our mind. But we have to understand that as we practice, this progress will take time. These new patterns aren't rewritten overnight. About 4 years ago, I made a post on Instagram on the topic New Year Better Me. And in it, I talk about the importance of shifting our perspective from aiming for perfection, which, if I'm honest, I can do a lot and struggle with, to aiming for progress. And that when we do so, we actually accomplish so much more over time rather than overnight. And it also helps set our expectations. When we aim for perfection, we set ourselves up for disappointment and we desire to quit when we fall short. But when we understand that progress is not linear, that even when we take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, we can recognize we still made 1 step in progress. That's something I've always called as simply just crashing upward. And man, I do recommend being able to go through this book, as I know how transformational it's been for me. We know a great practice when it comes to relating with others is to seek to understand first before trying to be understood, right? Well, don't we owe it to ourselves to seek and understanding ourselves better? Now, you might be here considering the book, but you may be one where you're like, hey, Jonathan, I don't read. Friend, can I tell you that I used to think the same way? I actually struggled when it came to reading and back in elementary school, getting C's and so forth, things like that. And reading really didn't capture my attention much in my pre-college years. It wasn't until I was in college where I became very curious and began to read a business book. And there's been a steady growth since to now I'm just eager. What we want to avoid is having a fixed mindset and instead aim for a growth mindset. We'll have to save the difference about the two for another episode, but we could get so caught up and on becoming discouraged by the effort rather than being encouraged from the outcome we could gain. When we desire something great enough, man, it moves us to take action. Change begins when we realize that the cost of staying the same is greater than the cost of making a difference. And the final thing I'll leave you is this, is that in our culture, especially for men, we can be so discouraged in experiencing and expressing our emotions honestly. If you ever heard the story of David and Goliath, or maybe you watched the Amazon TV show House of David, you can clearly see that David was a man's man, like a warrior, but he did not shy away from being honest about his emotions. So much so that one thing he wrote, he says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." See, while I'm extremely thankful for the resources that are available, especially this book, the biggest reason for me have been experiencing healing and still experiencing healing has been my faith. David also wrote within the same passage, it's found in Psalm 139. It's the first 6 verses. He says, "Lord, you have examined my heart and know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. See, in this season, my reliance and dependence on the Lord has increased so significantly. He's been doing such a deep internal work and has been using me facing my past and how it affects my present to bring a new healing. And I'm grateful that he's been with me every step of the way. My encouragement in this new year would be that before anything else, to rely on God, since he knows us best and that he cares. My hope for you is that you would experience a fresh new healing and be able to learn more about yourself, experience more wholeness, and in doing so, that the best is ahead of you. Thank you so much for joining this season launch, and definitely looking forward to the next one. Until next time.